It's hard to imagine this now, but I used to have an immense amount of love, respect, and even admiration for Electronic Arts. So many of the game cartridges I happily put in my Sega Genesis when I was a little kid had that little EA logo on them. And back then, that logo was like a stamp of quality. Most of the best games were made by EA. Well, actually, that's not true. Most of the best games were published by EA. But that was before modern times and modern video game development. Because modern video game development is completely broken. We've come so far from the glory days of teams of passionate and dedicated developers pouring all of their creativity into classic games like Wasteland, the Ultima series, the Final Fantasy series, the original couple of Zelda games, the Sonic series, Doom, and Wolfenstein. What those games lacked in graphical fidelity was more than made up for by the quality of their design, the efficiency of their systems, and a feeling that you get while playing that those devs cared about you as a player and that they had making the experience incredible for the player was at the forefront of their minds while making the game. Those teams set out to make incredible games at the cost of basically anything or everything else. But somewhere along the way, that spirit has died. Modern game development works like this. There are publishers, Electronic Arts, Activision, Ubisoft, to name a few of the biggest ones. And there are game development studios, BioWare, Bungie, Rockstar, Naughty Dog, again, just to name a few of the bigger ones. Sometimes a studio blends the lines between publisher and developer, like Bethesda, trying to do both at the same time. But in the interest of keeping this video at a reasonable length, I'll simplify the relationship between publishers and developers to the very simple and easy to understand: developers make video games, publishers pay for video games to be made. You see, video game development is extremely expensive. Starting a new development studio from nothing is next to impossible. It's not like starting a restaurant or a barbershop where you're going to start bringing in customers, making money, and offsetting startup costs in just a few months. It's years upon years upon years of extremely expensive overhead before you can even make a single dollar. And even if you did somehow make it to release, no one has ever heard of you, your company, or your game. And that is where publishers step in. They sign studios for exclusivity. They give the studios the money to make games and then publish those games under their well-known banner, guaranteeing more sales. It seems like a pretty decent setup, right? Studios get the money they need to make games. Publishers don't have to make games and still get a cut of the profits from video game sales. And gamers get a steady supply of new games to play. It's win, 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 right? Well, not so fast. The problem comes in with the strings that are always tied to money given. By the very nature of the fact that the publisher is paying for the development of the game, they get final say-so on practically everything. And their ultimate responsibility is profitability, to make money, to increase stock value. Electronic Arts in 2024 is not trying to make incredible video games. They are trying to make incredible profits. It doesn't matter if the many studios under their umbrella are filled with passionate, creative developers who really want to make incredible games. The final decision makers are bean counters. In fact, let me state this as emphatically as I can so the message is clear. The people with the final say about what games are or are not made, the people that decide what systems can or cannot go in the games that you play, do not play video games. They watch stock prices and fuss over pennies. For what it's worth, there is, of course, the entire indie game scene. Amazing games made without publishers or under the umbrella of smaller publishers that are pushing creativity but on smaller budgets. Incredible indie games like Stardew Valley would never be made by Electronic Arts. Can you imagine Ubisoft taking a chance on a single developer making a game about farming and dating with graphics straight out of the 90s? Of course not. The only problem here is that the smaller budgets and lack of graphical fidelity. Indie studios don't have the budget to put out beautiful AAA games to compete with the big boys. Enter Intrepid Studios, Stephen Sharif, and Ashes of Creation. Have you ever sat around with your buddies drinking and the old, if I had enough money, this is the video game I'd make conversation comes up? That's Steven Sharif. That's Intrepid Studios, and that's Ashes of Creation. Steven started this studio with his own money. He used Kickstarter to really push it off the ground, and he has then funded the rest through early access packs and cosmetic only store. The game is funded to completion and will release sooner or later, probably later, as the first actually complete and finished MMO since World of Warcraft 20 freaking years ago. Why? Because there is no publisher. There is no one holding financial tyranny over Steven or his studio. The game will release when the staff at Intrepid thinks it's ready, and it will release with all of the features Steven and his team want in the game. No one is telling Steven, well, World of Warcraft has this system and those 3 systems over there, and you have to put them in the game with near 1-to-1 copies or we aren't funding your game. No one is telling Steven, I know, we told you we'd give you 9 years to finish development, but we've got to start making money off you now, and our Q4 is looking pretty bad, so you have to release by the end of October, regardless of what state the game is in. Go get busy. Think of it. How many MMOs can you name that had real functioning end games at launch? Elder Scrolls Online, Star Wars The Old Republic, Rift, New World, Vanguard Saga of Heroes, Lord of the Rings Online, all of them launched with half-finished systems and a complete lack of anything that could be called an end game. And in most of the cases, that was actually the downfall of the game. And again, the people who are deciding these things don't play video games. They have no idea why these things fail so hard. They just know that World of Warcraft has millions of subscribers, so they instruct their developers to copy and mimic it in as many ways as they can, and then force the game out 2 years before it's ready. There is, of course, the giant outlier out there right now, Larian Studios and Baldur's Gate 3. The parallels between Larian and Intrepid are many. But the primary thing that they have in common, the thing that allows them to make incredible games in a day and age when truly awesome AAA games are so few and so far between, is the lack of a publisher, or self-publishing, which is the actual real case. At Larian and at Intrepid, the guys who have final say, the ones who decide the most important aspects of gameplay, are video game players themselves. Steven is an avid MMO player and has been since a very young age. He actually often tells the story of being like 8 years old, running up his parents' credit card on some ancient pay-by-the-minute MMO. He's been there right along with the rest of us for all the failed launches, all the carbon copy WoW clones, the stifling of creativity, and of course the advent and saturation of pay-to-win. He's actually played and experienced the systems that were designed to do one thing that completely failed in doing the one thing they were designed to do, and in many cases actually caused other problems. He's watched as other companies copied those failing systems and not offer even a slight variation to make them work better. He's been there with us the entire time. One of our own is making an MMO. So I hear you barking, but Zillin, Intrepid is lightning in a bottle. There aren't exactly rich, smart, dedicated gamers out there looking to start a new studio and risk it all making a new video game just falling off trees everywhere. Isn't this just a one-time thing? Ashes of Creation will release, be incredible, and steal massive amounts of players and attention from other MMOs and be the darling of the game industry, but there is no rich gamer behind them ready to make the next one? And I totally get that argument. And you know what, random YouTube commenter? You might even be right. But what if? What if the upcoming staggering success of Ashes of Creation, coupled with the absolutely insane success of Baldur's Gate 3, opens the eyes of publishers everywhere? What if they start paying attention to what happens when the studios have the money and time they need to complete a project, but don't have the bean counters looking over their shoulder every second of the day, telling them what to do and stifling their creativity in the interest of steady profits? What if modern video game development gets a second golden age of incredible games with true innovation and new ideas instead of flashy graphics with no substance to back it up? What if a new day is coming And we have Larian Studios, Intrepid Studios, and Ashes of Creation to thank for it.